We know the camp was allowed to stay for 5 weeks, and the campers left behind 15,000 pounds of trash at a cost of almost $25,000 to clean it all up, paid by TriMet, PBOT, and Portland Police. Ultimately, that's going to cost taxpayers. A lot of Portlanders, in fact, we did an unscientific poll of hundreds of people. The vast majority felt that the city should have stepped in sooner and should have been tougher on enforcement with the campers. Do you have any regrets?
I don't have regrets. I will say it's a very complicated issue, and I don't know that we have time to really hash out these issues in the 15 minutes I have here. The city stands against the federal government's current immigration policies. We feel that the federal government is violating people's constitutional rights. And every court ruling thus far has shown that we are on the right side of this issue and we're on the right side of the law. And yes, there was a cost to the taxpayers for the camp. There's also a much bigger cost to taxpayers and to society as a whole, to have families torn apart, to have upstanding residents and community members torn from their families, their jobs, their businesses, and deported when they have merit to stay. And that's the battle we're facing.
If there's another protest, another Occupy ICE, would you do anything differently?
Would I do anything different? I mean, it's hard to answer a hypothetical. It's obviously going to depend on the circumstances. People have a right to peacefully assemble and to protest their government. We worked with not just the camp, with a group called Abolish ICE. I know it gets a little confusing with all the different names and players, as well as the city and DHS to try to negotiate understanding and agreement and to keep people safe. And there was a point at which we felt like we could no longer do that. And that's the point at which Abolish ICE chose to disband, and I officially withdrew my support of the camp, but not of the fight in general.
At one point, the city, and under your Office of Permitting, was going to cite ICE for building this 8-foot fence. You didn't, but you were going to, while not citing campers for their fences, their tarps, blocking the sidewalk, blocking the street. We had reporters who witnessed racial slurs, people banging on cars, dumping urine down storm drains, defecation. So there were a lot of people who felt like the city was hypocritical in not enforcing those laws, looking the other way, having a hands-off policy. Is it appropriate to base your policing decisions on your politics?
I don't believe that was what has happened at all. To be clear, the citation for the fence did not come from my office or from BDS leadership. It was a random occurrence of one of our enforcement folks being out in the area for another issue, noticing this tall fence and issuing a citation. I believe what happened was that fence was on federal, well, it's leased by the federal government, and therefore our rules didn't apply. So
but still, there were a lot of other rules and laws that were being broken at the camp that were not enforced, that Portland police weren't allowed to do anything. They had to have a hands-off approach. And people felt like you weren't protecting all citizens, neighbors near the camp, people trying to use the street, federal officers. Was that selective enforcement?
The mayor's position was that this was an issue with the federal government, and they have their own police to deal with the protesters, and it was up to them to deal with the protesters. The police were called numerous times, and every call was responded to. Maybe not, it didn't entail a visit to the camp, because these were non-emergency calls, but we worked with neighbors, we worked with businesses, we negotiated to reopen Bancroft Street, which was repeatedly closed by the feds. It's, like I said, it's a complicated issue. It's going to be hard to hash it all out here. It's just a very challenging issue. When you feel that your federal government is endangering people's lives and violating their constitutional rights, what is appropriate to do?
And soon in November, voters are going to vote on whether they want to keep sanctuary status for the state that's been on the books for 30 years, either keep it or repeal it. Why do you think it's important that Portland keep that sanctuary status?
Because of the very reasons I've been detailing.
Are you worried that it might not pass? That it might pass to repeal the sanctuary status?
I am concerned because, again, it's a complicated issue, and a lot of people have a strong initial reaction to this issue and may not be willing to educate themselves on it. We need to defend our immigrant families, and we need to give them the due process that they are entitled to by the law, and we need to let the immigration courts decide whether or not they have a right to be there. That's not for City Council to decide, it's not for the public to decide, it's not for the police to decide. And what we're fighting for is, it really comes down to constitutional rights.